Welcome back, Boss Bitches, to the Boss Bitch Rising podcast. I am so excited you're here, and I'm so excited to welcome back Lindsey Head. She was on our podcast just a few weeks ago, and we kind of got sidetracked away from our leadership conversation into a financials for entrepreneurs or business owners conversation. And she is so knowledgeable in this space. And, I just wanted to welcome you back, Lindsey, to the Boss Bitch Rising podcast yet again. And we're going to get into a really juicy conversation about how business owners, entrepreneurs, especially if you're new to the game, how you can set your financials up in your business for future success. So
thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for coming back. I'm so grateful to have you here. Can you give our listeners a little background of what your background is in this financial space?
Absolutely. So I have been a chief financial officer for, going on the majority of my career. So since I was in my early 20s, so that almost is 20 years. But yes, I've been a CFO for fast growing companies. And with that job, that's a chief financial officer, I oversaw everything from HR, operations, tech, legal, and more focused on the financial aspects of fast growing businesses. So that really entailed setting them up, creating a model for them to strive for, things to watch over time so that they could really be like a powerhouse company and scale and grow, as efficiently as possible with the resources they had.
What would be one of the first things that you would have a new business owner look at when it comes to their finances?
The first question I would ask would say, are you organized and do you have a bookkeeping system? It goes back to the numbers and the tracking. And what I find with small business owners, medium business owners, depending on what stage they are in their business, it just doesn't matter. You have to get organized and separate, right? You can't be running your personal life and your business together. Not recommended, right? So the best you can do is, that's my first question is, do you have an existing bookkeeping system? Do you have a bookkeeper? And are you keeping track of things on a regular basis? Or what is your schedule look like? And usually I get like kind of deer in headlights, like, I'm not doing any of that. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Good place to start.
Oh my gosh, this is honestly one of the first mistakes that I made as an entrepreneur. I've always had a side hustle of some sort. When I was in my early 20s, I was like selling art. I was doing personal training on the side. I had an actual job, but I was collecting cash or other forms of payments and nothing was organized, but I was claiming all of it together at the end of the taxable year. And when it came to filing taxes, it was an absolute mess. I had no record of expenses. And then when it came to paying taxes, I was like, why do I owe so much? Like I had no idea. There was no plan. So getting organized and having some bookkeeping system are two of the biggest mistakes that I made when I was, first starting out in business, and something that was kind of a learning hurdle because I didn't have extra finances to hire a bookkeeper. So I had to make mistakes in figuring out a system that worked for me then. And that's, since evolved now. But I really want to dive into, especially for new business owners, how we can start to evolve our systems so that we can begin to scale and grow the business. And, I know that you've helped large companies go from making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to over millions of dollars. And I really am just curious about this whole process.
Yes, thank you. So something I'm really proud of is I worked with a PR agency for a number of years and during a very, very fast growth stage. And as Kale mentioned, I took them, help them grow in the financial aspect from about $750 a year to over nearly 15 million a year in annual revenue, which included so many things, growing, scaling, the headcount, all that stuff, and doing operations for them and so much. But really what that banked on was, how do you have your financial strategy set up? Because you can't get somewhere if you don't know where you're headed, right? And you don't have the right metrics in place that you're monitoring and managing so that the business is going to be profitable. And if the business is profitable, as Kale mentioned, you're going to pay taxes. And it's not this magical number. It really does have a calculation that you can plan for over time. So a lot of the systems and organizing goes into, yes, getting the metrics in place you need, getting the bookkeeping system, knowing how often you're going to review your profit and loss statement, your income statement, same thing, right? There's a lot of names for the same reports, you guys. That's what a lot of business owners are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, it's the same thing. So you've got your P&L and you have your balance sheet and you have to manage your cash flow. And when you're starting out, the biggest thing, and even big companies, they're hyper focused on cash flow. You need to be reviewing this regularly. What's coming in, where is it going? So there are no surprises. When you need to collect your money, right? You need to invoice your clients. You got to get that paid on time so you can keep operating the business in a way that's going to support you, your life, and your growth plans. So getting into that, I've always used like an Excel model that I've developed over time for the cash flow model. And it's worked really, really well for a couple different companies I've worked with. Obviously, it's tailored to you and your needs, because everyone has, all the business owners I work with have different outflows, right? They have different inflows, they got different outflows. They bill differently. Maybe it's auto, maybe they're actually invoicing, maybe they're, who knows, however they're getting the money in and how they're putting the money out, right? And so people say, well, I have all this money going out, but why am I still showing a profit? Because all the money that you spend is not always an expense. It might be on your balance sheet, but you're still paying out that money. You might be taking a draw as an owner. That's not going to go on your P&L. There's some things with how accounting is set up for a business owner. You just have to understand the basics to start making sense of it and plan appropriately. And just trust me that it gives you the power when it comes down to tax season. I say tax season is so stressful for business owners, but if you knew that you're putting a certain amount aside every month because of your model that you have set up to calculate how much you're going to owe in taxes, would that give you some relief? If you knew like, oh my gosh, I expect to pay X, or I have a strategy that's going to, net out to this amount that I'm going to owe taxes on, and you knew that going into it, there really shouldn't be a ton of stress involved.
Yes. And that's exactly my point. Is sometimes this feels so far beyond comprehension for a lot of people, but the more you know, the more you can do with that information, and the more success you could possibly achieve for yourself and your company and the people that are in it. And so just knowing the basics, and that's what you just mentioned, is just knowing the basics is the first place to start. You do not have to become an expert in, business tax law and all of these other things, but having a plan, having a system in place, and having that baseline knowledge of how you can make the best decisions for your financial health in your business, and then how that actually creates a ripple effect into your own personal life as well.
Yes.
So
it's huge. Yeah, that's the biggest thing I can say. Take that off your plate. Learn a little bit. Use the system. I mean, there's a ton of apps out there. Yes, I'm a big fan of QuickBooks Online. Yes, they're charging more and more money these days, but it still has to be done, right? Some sort of accounting system. But there's also a ton of apps that you can use, capturing all your receipts and keeping those records for a certain number of years, to suffice if the IRS came to audit you. And everyone gets panicked, and it's like they're not out there to try to audit everybody. There's not enough people that work there. But just do it the way that being a responsible business owner that you can do the best you can. You're not gonna have everything, but do the best you can, write a ton of notes, and just keep records.
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned understanding what your cash flow needs to be in order to operate the business. And this is something that we kind of talked about before we started recording this episode, is really chunking down, understand what your business needs to make, understanding the big goal, understanding the trajectory of how you would like to be scaling and growing the business, and what that looks like in terms of inventory or services provided or rendered, or what does that actually look like? How are you charging? And then chunking that down into smaller actionable steps. Do you have any strategies or tips and tricks that you can share with our listeners on that?
Working backwards. Like if you're a business owner and you have say you have a full-time job and this is your side hustle and you want to make that leap, you've got to be crystal clear on how much you have to start making as a business owner after the possible taxes, and how much you're going to actually take home to make that leap, right? Or else you're just going to keep wondering, or you're like, I just need enough. And it's like, well, what's enough? Enough for some people is $5,000. Enough for other people is $20,000 a month, right? You just don't know what that is. But working backwards and thinking about your lifestyle and how much you need as a business owner, because we start businesses to make money, right? And to follow our passion and all of those things. But truly, you go into business to make money for yourself and feel proud about it, and to get back and do that. But know what that number is. So if you don't know what that number is, start thinking like, how much is your rent? How much is your mortgage? How much is your car payment? How much do you pay for insurance? Do your own budget personally, so that number can help guide you to what your business needs to make to support you as a business owner, especially if you're a solopreneur, because that's so important. And when you take the step to bring on employees, there's a whole nother discussion about that and my recommendations around a service business and having employees. But you really just need that budget. You need to know and factor in savings always, and debt payments. People don't think about that. They're like, oh, I didn't think about the credit cards I have to pay off. Oh, I didn't think about blah, blah, blah. And that's all your outflows. Every single thing that hits your bank account is part of that outflow number that you have to calculate on a monthly basis.
Yeah, I really made a lot of these mistakes in the very beginning where I thought of a number that like sounded good. And that's like where I put my initial baseline. Was like, oh, 6 grand a month sounds good. That should do it. And as my business grew, that number worked for a little bit of time. But as my business grew, my expenses grew. I hired employees. I had these other things going on that was a lot more money going out. At a certain point, I needed to update that point, that mile mark of my business. And I didn't for like a year. And I was like, why isn't this number working anymore? Like it worked last year, but it's not working for me now. And I actually had to increase a couple $1,000s actually.
Wow.
And that really had to take into, like you said, all of the credit card expenses that you have, knowing to the dime, all the business expenses, all the personal expenses, how much you're spending on medical insurance, how much you want to hit in your savings goals, like all of that needs to be taken into account.
Yep. I call it your money model and your money system, right? And you have to build that out personally and professionally with your business to really have it make sense. And I'm a big automation person, but there's a lot of strategy and thought that goes into building that out, right? So if you know your business is here, the inflows, the outflows, and one of those outflows is feeding your personal life, right? Your life in general. You need to know if that amount you're pulling from that business is going to sustain you. So you're not stressed out trying to figure out, where am I going to get more money? Because you'll never make the leap if you're in that stage of your business, or you're never going to feel comfortable. You're always going to have this uneasy feeling of like you're not making enough. And it really goes back to the planning and the strategy at the get-go.
Yes, absolutely. And, being a first-time business owner, what is the next step into moving away from being a newbie, being, novice and kind of naive with how we're managing our finances? What's the next step into becoming like a higher level player in the game?
I'd say educate yourself on business financials. And what that means is know what a balance sheet is, know what a P&L is, know what they tell you, right? Because you can hear these things, but really just understand them. So educate yourself. I've taught a couple courses here locally in San Diego in person that goes into the founder's financial formula. That's what I call it. So just understanding all the pieces that go into it, not at an expert level. It's really at the basic level, but it's really just arming yourself with knowledge so you kind of get it. And it won't stick right away. If you're brand new, it'll take some time. And then you work with someone, you say, okay, teach me. I mean, I love teaching. That's my passion. But like understanding what they tell you over time. So making sure you set up at least one time a month that you're going to look at these things. Make sure you get a bookkeeping system, whichever one you choose. There's free ones out there. There's QuickBooks. There's a lot of them now that are out there that work for entrepreneurs, and they really try to make it easy. Make sure you're reviewing those once a month. Because that's the thing, they get the system, and I swear to you, nobody will ever use them till like December. And then you're just trying to backflow all those numbers, and it's fine. It's totally just how the flow goes, right? We get busy and we focus on our business. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs I work with who are like, oh crap, I haven't done my bookkeeping. And I'm like, that's okay, we can help you. And there's ways to fast track it, but then you just don't know. It's not giving you the knowledge. It's not arming you with any numbers to make decisions, right? You're just getting it in there to get your taxes done. And I would just encourage people, to say like, get the numbers in there so you can actually make decisions with them.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest mistakes I made. And I really shift over. I think it was in 2019. I remember sitting on the floor in my living room with all of my receipts. Like I was like organizing them, and it took me 4 hours to organize a year's worth of receipts because I wasn't doing any type of bookkeeping. And I was just miserable through the whole process. I was like pouring some wine, hoping that would help. It did not.
Sometimes a little bit, but yeah.
And so I was like, I'm never doing this again. I do not want to put myself through this agony ever again. So I made a commitment to myself that I was going to get more organized with my finances. I was going to hire a bookkeeper. And that's not necessarily something that most new business owners need to do. Just get organized. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And like Lindsey just said, making sure that you're having, I call them money dates, where I'm sitting down with myself once a month and going through all of my expenses, going through all of my income. And I have different pillars in my business that I have income coming in through. So I actually like to see, is one-on-one coaching my biggest earner this month? Or was it my certifications? Or was it breakthrough sessions? Or was it a VIP day? And really understanding this month, what was my biggest earner? What was my lowest earner? Is there a trend in that throughout the year or each season or quarter? And that actually really allows you to have a bigger picture perspective of the seasons of your business. and how to pivot and accommodate certain things as you go through the year. Are you busier at certain times of the year? Are you slower at other points in the year? How can you actually get organized? And I'm so glad that I had to go through that agony experience that last year in 2019 to never want to have to do that to myself again, but then to also really understand my finances. So aside from the money date that I have once a month, I also do like daily check-ins and weekly check-ins. And I know that might seem like a lot for people, but I like celebrating when I make money. So anytime I have a sale, I log it in I have like a little system just on my phone, and I get to see what I'm at that day, what I've made for the month so far. And
Awesome.
I'm constantly on top of it. And I think those little things, just implementing the small steps, the small actions, has really changed the way that I'm showing up in my business and how I can actually provide services in my business, because now I know what to expect.
I love that. You are so on point, Kel. It's so important because knowing the trends and knowing your results and knowing where you should focus your energy, right? Where your focus goes, energy flows, right? It's like you gotta have to have that. But if you don't know your numbers, it's not gonna be, you're not aiming for anything. And so it's really, and celebrate. I love that you do that, because celebrating, we're in this to make money, right? If you're a business owner, just make that money. Everybody wants to make money. It makes life easier. I mean, unless you really don't want to, but I kind of think
like a $12 sale. And that's the reason why I like doing that, is because like before I wasn't keeping, I call it like a pulse. I wasn't keeping the pulse on like how much money I was making until the end of the month. I was like, oh, I've made all of this money. Like seasons in my business, I've noticed that almost always, like clockwork, my business slows down right around the holidays. And that can be alarming for business owners if you're having like a stellar summer and then all of a sudden it starts to dry up. And then, you know, I usually say that I have a slow 4 to 5 months right around the holidays, like late October to about mid-February. It's pretty slow. And then things start to pick back up again. And then I'm feeling on top of the world because month after month, I'm making more money until about the middle of October. And then it kind of bottoms out again. And it's just this cycle. It's the same seasonal type of income flow that I was having when I was a personal trainer too. And so I don't know if that's most service-based businesses or most coaching businesses, but I've noticed that seasonal trend for myself. And so understanding the trends of my business can allow me to save more money in the summertime and understand that I need to emotionally prepare myself for what's in the winter.
Yes. That's so important. I couldn't agree more. And you have to understand the trends. If you don't ever track this, you're not going to know that. And you're going to have more panic attacks, or, you know, you're going to feel more panicked, more stressed. Like, oh my God, it's over. Oh my God, everyone's leaving me. I don't have any business. And then all of a sudden January comes along, or whatever that cycle is for you. And you're like, oh yeah, we're good. But you can't plan for that if you don't know that and have your finger on the pulse.
Yeah. And for especially new business owners, kind of understanding that there are going to be seasons in business. Most businesses, and even product-based businesses, depending on the product, depending on the service, you might have busier summers or busier winters. I know I was looking into starting an Amazon business, and it was finding products that actually are seasonal products, because your sales go through the roof for 4 months, and then the years is somewhat dry, but you could make millions in 4 months and sustain you through the rest of the year.
Yes, I love that. It's true. Yeah, and depends on what type of business you're in, for sure. Not only seasonal. Yeah, it's like the types of clients you service, the types of niche you're in. It's all of that stuff.
So would you say that scaling from, you know, where a business is at currently, no matter the size, if it's a small business or if they're making a couple $100,000 a year, would you say the system to scaling to over $1 million is somewhat similar for small businesses versus somebody who's making over 100K?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that's a really pivotal point, right? There's a lot of things that have to be worked out in your business in terms of like operationally, but financially, if you create the model now, it's going to be more like clockwork, right? You know, your numbers are going to grow. Your target is this, you know, you need to hit X to make that, you know, and then building in your tax planning also with those numbers and your savings plan. But once you create the model, I would say from the 100,000 to the million, crossing $1 million is a really big number for people, right? I mean, that is like celebrate through I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. And then from there, it's like a whole nother different scaling game. But I'd say within that number, if you're a solopreneur, you can do it. Like, you need to have all your systems intact, right? Operationally, do you have people on board? Is that HR? How are you going to handle those types of things? So there's a lot that goes into that for the efficiency piece. But as long as you're guided by your numbers, you can make those decisions, right? You're going to bring on this new system. It's $2,000 a month. Well, if you're not making 2,000 plus more a month to bring that system on, does it make sense? How profitable are you right now? Does profitability really matter? That's the other question. A lot of business owners don't want to show a profit. And this is a strategy, right? They're okay breaking even. The IRS may not be okay with you breaking even or showing a loss for 5 years, but you got to be in business to make money, right? So if you're showing money, obviously making money and your expenses and you're netting out to zero, not a huge deal. Maybe it's not every year, right? It's a different strategy for everybody, but there's businesses who always want to retain a really healthy profitability number because they want to create value in their business and maybe potentially sell their company later down the road. If that's not your strategy and it's break even, you have a little bit more wiggle room to take on more expenses if it works with your cash flow.
Yes, that's a really good point that you make too, is kind of understanding the future of your business. And this is something that I encourage all of my new clients to do, is write a business plan. Where are you starting? Where do you see yourself in 5 and 10 years? What does the growth of the business look like? Yes, we're talking just manifestation, if you will, right? Like, yes. Dreams are going into this business plan, but of course we want to be realistic too. And that helps you set up the systems, the strategy, the plan to grow. But you also know what the purpose and intention of growing is. Are you doing it just to like serve people and make more money? Or like Lindsey just said, like, are you looking to actually sell the business one day? And that's something that if you are looking to do, considering that from day one is extremely important. So you know your financial plan moving forward.
Absolutely. So important. And even if it's like, I don't want to sell it, but I also don't want to work the business for the rest of my life. I want to ramp it up and then I want to take a back seat, like as a board member of my own business or whatever that looks like. That's a different plan, right? A different strategy. So knowing kind of your gut feeling of what it is, and of course things change, but at least you start there. I mean, I always say set up a business to be ready to be sold anytime, because you never know who's knocking on your door and you're like, whoa, I had no idea it could be worth that much. And you're ready and you didn't even realize you were ready. But if your numbers aren't ready, that's likely not going to happen.
Where would be the first place that you would kind of turn somebody to start educating themselves on all of this kind of stuff?
God, there's so many resources now. Reach out to people in the industry. Reach out to me. I'm here. I'm available. I would love to talk to anybody, any of your listeners. Excuse me, guys. I love talking to entrepreneurs just about ideas and strategy. So I'm available. I'm here locally, but I'm also anywhere in the world, right? We're all virtual these days. YouTube's amazing. TikTok's out there. There's a ton of different ideas you can get from a bunch of different people. But if you want a reliable source, talk to someone in your someone local if you want, and someone kind of in your same niche saying like, what are you doing? Do you have anybody like this? That's where I've gotten a lot of clients are people saying, hey, talk to existing clients and it's word of mouth. And like, hey, talk to Lindsey about XYZ and things like that. So it's the same way with any business, right? Grow with your reputation and what you're able to do for people. But start there.
Yeah, finding a financial consultant and also a lawyer, a business lawyer, I think would be two key players in growing your business. If your business is just a side hustle right now, then that's maybe something to consider if you're thinking about taking the leap and going all in with the side hustle. But if you're a new business owner and if you're looking to continue to grow your business and, scale into the 100K over $1 million mark, really setting up those systems and having people like Lindsey in your life who can just advise you on the best next steps to take, maybe finding a lawyer as well to set up all the legality is another
right. That's huge. You gotta be set up right. You have to be set up right from a system standpoint and legally. So there's a lot that goes into that, and ideas of why. You want to know why you would set yourself up in one way or another.
Absolutely. Lindsey, you're so smart and I'm so appreciative. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we get off? Any strategies, any tips to growing their business and just getting smarter with their finances?
Get organized, have a plan. And you're natural salespeople because you're in business for yourself. Most of you are probably on this listening to this podcast, or you want to be in business for yourself. So you are a natural salesperson. So figure out your sales strategy as well. How are you going to bring in the money? And then also, building the back end. I see you cannot have a solid foundation without thinking about the finances for your business.
Absolutely. And maybe setting things up on automation too, to take
Yes.
less of the who do I have to invoice? When do I have to
Your
invoice?
brain space. Yeah.
All the things, right? Off
Yep.
of the table. So automation could be another huge thing too there.
Yes. Yes. I should send you an article I wrote about automation. I'll do it sometime, but yeah, it's all about automation because you can have more people to do the job, but it's a lot easier to just kind of have it already on autopilot. So you don't have to think about it. And if you do hire people, you're using them for their brains instead of them doing the busy work.
Yes. Yes. Send that to me and I'll add it in the show notes of this episode. So our listeners can also have access to that as well.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Lindsey, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with
Thank
us today.
you.
So grateful to have you back yet again.
You're awesome.
Got a baby coming in a few weeks. So
like 7 days,
Yeah.
everyone.
Oh my goodness. I admire you in all the ways and I just think you're amazing. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Yes.
Love you, Kale. You're amazing. You guys can follow me on Instagram, reach out, anything, direct message, whatever you want. I'm here, I'm available, and I'm grateful to you, Kale.
Yes.
Always. So always.
What are your
great to see you.
Instagrams? Because I know you have a few, right?
I got a few. The first one is I am Lindsey Head. And the other one, our family, is Boss Parents, BOSSPARENTS. And then my husband and I also run a company called Curls Poppin. So curly hair. I don't have a curly hair, but he does. So go check it out.
A beautiful head of hair.
Yeah.
Lindsey, thanks again.